Jackpot, directed by Paul Feig, stars Awkwafina, John Cena, and Simu Liu. In the near future, a grand lottery has been established. The catch is to kill the winner before sundown to legally claim their multi-million-dollar jackpot. When Katie Kim mistakenly finds herself with the winning ticket, she reluctantly joins forces with amateur lottery protection agent Noel Cassidy, who must get her to sundown in exchange for a piece of her prize. I'll be honest, the only real reason I bothered to check this movie out was for John Cena. I don't think the guy is an insanely incredible actor, but whenever he does comedy, he really is good at nailing some pretty funny performances, so I was hoping to see some of that here, and other than that, I really went into this one blind. I'll start with the performances. Firstly, talking about Awkwafina, I, like many people, am extremely tired of seeing her in movies, whether they're good or bad. In fairness, she mainly is in bad ones, and on top of that, is just mostly bad in whatever she's in, so I'm just sick of seeing her, and having her in this movie wasn't any different. However, I will admit, whoever thought of the idea that I'm going to explain actually had the smarts for once casting her as the straight man, or I guess in this case the straight woman, in this movie. Despite this though, she basically still acts the exact same as she does in every other movie she's been in. She's just incredibly annoying here, and so much of her humor gets insanely irritating throughout the entire runtime, while admittedly that could be more down to the screenplay rather than solely just on her performance alone. In terms of a lead, I don't think she holds the power to be a solid one, as much as she'll try to force charisma and charm out of her that always ends up falling flat every single time. Is this one of her worst performances though? I wouldn't say that, as it's basically on par with everything else she's done, except for the fact that her usual role of being the silly one has been reversed here. It could really be down to the fact that I simply don't like her as an actress, but it doesn't help when her performance has nothing substantial to give. John Cena plays a guy whose whole job is to basically protect Awkwafina's character in the whole movie. When it comes to the comedic moments, there will be an occasional line delivery or facial expression. It did work for me, simply because I think there's times when John Cena is able to pull off comedy pretty well. I've rarely seen him in any serious roles, but whenever I've seen him do comedic roles, he's usually able to pull it off. However, his ability is definitely neutralized here, as many of the jokes he has to say always end up falling flat, but on the odd occasion though, his performance still is able to be the highlight whenever he's on screen. Obviously, whenever he's in action scenes, he's able to pull these parts off well, since the guy's built like a tank, and the choreography between him and other fighters did look believable, and on occasions a little brutal. Whenever he acts like a nice guy, he's almost able to pull this off really well, and this is another aspect that feels pretty believable, and maybe get on board with his character at least. He's definitely one of the highlights of this. Simu Liu plays the villain in this movie, and with that statement, I simply want to speak to the producers and casting directors directly. Can we stop this? Alright, this is the second time this year I've seen the guy being cast as a villain in a movie, and it just doesn't work. It didn't work with the dog shit Netflix movie, and it doesn't work here either. Please stop trying to typecast this guy as a villain. He's about as threatening as your high school bully. He just doesn't do a good job here. Whenever there's moments where he's trying to act threatening or menacing to the main characters, it always comes across as laughable, and I promise this isn't the movie's intention. They try to play it completely serious, and they want you to believe that this guy is some force to be reckoned with. I'm surprised there was never a moment where John Cena's character didn't just easily rip his throat in one clean swoop. There's moments where he tries to bring some humor to his role, and it also doesn't work here at all. This guy is just another actor I don't find to work when it comes to comedy, as I've never seen a single movie he was in that I found him to be funny, despite maybe in Barbie. Funny enough, this is already the second movie that both John Cena and Simu Liu share together. When it was revealed the guy has some evil motives in this, I just rolled my eyes, as I knew immediately not only was he going to give an incredibly forgettable performance as a villain, but just not even to be that big of a deal at all. It was just incredibly laughable. Ayden Mayeri plays Awkwafina's character's roommate in this movie. I basically only want to talk about this nearly as doubling on talking about the writing, because if the woman's goal here was to be incredibly hated while watching this, holy shit, she nailed it, because her character is fucking awful in this movie. She's so annoying and insufferable, and I found it amazing that the writers and producers of this movie were able to find someone more annoying than Awkwafina. Everything she did in this movie was just annoying, and the type of character she was, I just didn't like, and I do think that is more so down to the writing more than anything. Whenever she was on screen, it just felt more, I just felt more angry the more she appeared. She would probably be the worst character in the movie if someone else didn't show up. Basically, this movie is full of cameos. The beginning of this movie literally starts with Sean William Scott from American Pie in some conflict, and I swear the main joke is the fact that you're supposed to recognize it's him, and then blah, applaud if you will, and it just felt very weird. This movie also has Leslie David Baker, who is known mostly for playing Stanley in The Office, and it was just really sad to see him here, but judging by the end credit outtakes, he at least seemed to be having a fun time on set. The biggest and most most annoying cameo to see in this movie was Machine Gun fucking Kelly of all people. If you don't know who he is, firstly, you must live under some rock and I pity you. And second, he's basically the guy that said he would sleep with underage girls a few years ago. Oh, sorry guys, he's not Machine Gun Kelly here. He wants to be known as Colson Baker, which is not only his government name, but I guess maybe the name he wants to be known as more professionally when it comes to films now. Because obviously, a man of Machine Gun Kelly's prowess would want to be known as a professional actor. I'll be more forgiving. He is only in one scene, and for the majority of the time he's on screen, it was nice to see him get beaten up the whole time, but it definitely made the movie way less enjoyable as soon as he appeared. I do want to mention probably the one positive outside of John Cena's presence that I have for this movie. I do think initially the concept, while a little derivative with a different coat of paint, is actually kind of interesting. This movie is set in the future where the lottery is set up to where whoever wins it has to survive this purge-like countdown if they want to officially get the money. All while this is happening, everyone else is basically allowed to kill this person to take the money from themselves. This alone does actually seem like a cool concept, and it's such a shame that it gets absolutely wasted on in a movie like this. Throughout the runtime, you're tricked into thinking this thing has good and smart satire, but it does not. It's incredibly basic, and the things that it talks about and has been said to death so many times before, and when it's over explained here, it becomes across as completely disingenuous and passive aggressive, which doesn't give it a pass for actually being good. I mean, come on, Idiocracy has wittier fucking satire than this movie. The way people are written in this really pissed me off. It's one of these movies where the writers will write all of the characters to be intentionally dense and over arrogant, all except for the main character, which comes across as making the world feel incredibly unrealistic, which happens really early on in this, and I found it to be such a quick way to isolate people as they watch it. I think things could have been handled better if people actually acted normal up until the lottery situation happens. Not only would this be totally out of left field, possibly adding more comedy to the situation, but it would have added a layer of commentary on the idea of mob mentality, which I think deep down this movie could be wanting to commentate on, but I do think this movie is too stupid to properly speak about topics like this. The writing as a whole is awful all around. The direction the story takes is incredibly generic. The humor borders on being bad to just god awful, mainly relying on reference humor what felt like 90% of the time, and after the 10th fucking times the characters made jokes like this, naturally it was insanely annoying and added to what was already such an insufferable watch. There's a point near the end of the movie where the conflict stops so that Simu Liu's character can essentially do an ad about LaCroix and how amazing it is, and I was just dumbfounded at how someone could just sit down and write something like this. Every character in the first half genuinely acts like they've been fucking lobotomized, and it was always frustrating to watch. At one point, the movie basically even stops its main plot through convenience, as they need a way to get rid of thousands of people following Awkwafina and John Cena's character so they can have their little conflict with Simu Liu. And as soon as this is over, they bring back that plot point and suddenly they all want to start chasing them again. I thought it was just a lazy way to get rid of it and bring it back into the plot of the movie. The action in this was such a letdown. There's the odd occasion where it is fine to look at, and it's not shot incredibly poorly. I think it's insane to me that this is an R-rated movie that doesn't feel like it in the slightest. This is the Deadpool type of R rating, especially in terms of humor, where it more so applies for edgy 14-year-olds who want to watch something a bit of swearing in it. That's what it is at the end of the day, and people do make movies like this because I see movies like this with R ratings and I know for a fact they're not for adults. It always ends up being such a letdown. I think I mainly hated this because this movie almost felt like the inverse of the film Death Race 2000. Some might not consider this a great movie, but to me personally, it's something I really liked and shares somewhat similar ideas, especially in terms of commentary, but where Jackpot fails to talk about anything of substance, Death Race actually makes this satire really entertaining and hilarious without delving into a fully fledged comedy. Half the movie feels like improv, and when the end credit outtakes started playing in this movie, I'm convinced a good 70% of this shit was actually improv, as we see many scenes with multiple different takes where actors are just saying random shit, seemingly whatever comes to mind. It actually feels like the director told the actors to just say whatever they wanted, and this became extremely frustrating to see. What's the point of having writers for movies if you're basically going to take a massive shit all over the script and tell the actors to make it up as they go along? I'm not completely against improv. I think some really great scenes in cinema have ended up being improv, but when the whole movie is like this, it becomes really obvious you don't know what you're doing. The effects when they were used in this movie were pretty terrible. I don't know what the budget was for this, but I can't imagine it being insanely high. Whenever cars or other things things would explode and get set on fire. You're subjected to some of the most cheap looking flame effects I've seen in a movie in a long time. It always looked so fake and uncanny that I had to roll my eyes at it. There's terrible green screen in so many points of the movie, especially when people drive in cars. I'm seeing this happen a lot in modern movies, and it makes me yearn for the days when filmmakers used rear projection for car driving scenes. Either do it for real or bring back rear projection, because that always looked better than these terrible green screen scenes. Overall, I really hated this movie. It's just one of these examples of modern cinema that makes a good argument for how the art form is dying. If this is the type of shit that keeps getting put out nowadays, then Hollywood filmmaking truly is cooked and fucked. Nearly everything falls flat on its face in an embarrassing display to the fact that this movie is essentially the visual equivalent of a car crash. You know it's horrible, but you can't stop watching to see the result. There's a little moment in the end credits where they allude to a sequel, and I hope it never comes. I hope people are smart and choose to skip over this while they're scrolling through the Amazon suggested tab. I'm giving Jackpot 1 star. This is an incredibly unfunny, poorly acted, terribly written, derivative, and shockingly terrible movie that no one should have to be subjected to watching. It's such a shame to have fragments of a good story here get buried under studio heads needing to create more slop for streaming services. It's incredibly disingenuous and full of vomit-inducing irony that only chronic Reddit users would enjoy watching. Amazon, I've found, is one of the better streaming services usually, and they have a massive library of really great cinema. I mean, for fuck's sake, they have 8.5 on there. So I beg, if you take anything from this video, please seek out one of the better things Amazon has to offer and put the thought of this movie far, far back into your mind, as this will easily be forgotten about in a week. Be honest, before clicking on this video, you didn't actually know what this movie was, did you?